Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into the wild, wild west to uncover a story so incredible, so full of twists and turns, it almost seems like it leaped straight out of a Hollywood script. We're talking about none other than John Wesley Hardin, a name synonymous with gunslinging outlaws and a legend that grew bigger with every bullet he fired. But today we're not just recounting his life. We're peeling back the layers to reveal the truly shocking truth about his final moments. You think you know how it ended? Prepare to be surprised. For those unfamiliar, John Wesley Hardin was a Texas outlaw, gunfighter and lawyer. Yes, a lawyer, who was incredibly active in the post-Civil War era. He claimed to have killed dozens of men, though the true number is heavily debated. He was known for his quick draw, his volatile temper, and a life spent largely on the run, constantly dodging lawmen and vengeance seekers. His story is a whirlwind of escapes, captures, jailbreaks, and endless violence. He was a man shaped by his times, and he certainly left his mark on the era. After years of being a fugitive, Hardin was eventually captured in 1877 on a train in Florida, thanks to the relentless pursuit of Texas Rangers. He was brought back to Texas, tried and sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder. Now you might think that prison would be the end of his story, a quiet fade into obscurity. But for John Wesley Hardin, even incarceration was just another chapter in his extraordinary tale. While behind bars, he actually studied law, read theological books, and even penned his notorious autobiography, which, as you can imagine, is quite the read. He was pardoned in 1894 after serving 17 years, and surprisingly, he emerged a free man, ready to try and build a new life. But freedom for a man like Hardin wasn't as straightforward as it might seem. He quickly found himself back in the familiar landscape of lawlessness, albeit in a different capacity. He moved to El Paso, Texas, intending to practice law. Imagine walking into a courtroom and seeing John Wesley Hardin as the defense attorney. He remarried briefly and tried to settle down. But the shadows of his past, the reputation of a deadly gunfighter, followed him like a persistent phantom. El Paso in the 1890s was still a rough-and-tumble town, a place where old grudges and new conflicts could ignite at any moment. Hardin, despite his attempts at a new life, couldn't completely shake off the man he once was. His fiery temper, his penchant for confrontation, and his legendary status meant he was a magnet for trouble, and that trouble found him on August 19, 1895. The circumstances leading up to his death are where the story gets really fascinating, and frankly, quite bizarre. Hardin had gotten involved in a dispute with a local lawman, City Marshal John Selman Sr. Now Selman was no stranger to violence himself. He was an ex-outlaw and gunfighter with a reputation as murky as Hardin's. The dispute reportedly stemmed from Hardin's affair with the wife of one of Selman's deputies, a man named George Scarborough. Scarborough was himself a pretty notorious character and had a deep animosity towards Hardin. The tension escalated rapidly. Hardin, true to form, had threatened Selman, and Selman, being the kind of man he was, wasn't about to back down. El Paso was a powder keg, and Hardin's presence was the fuse. The town was buzzing with whispers and expectations of a showdown between these two legendary figures. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew that a confrontation was inevitable. It was just a matter of when and where. Now here's where the shocking truth really comes into play. You might expect a dramatic face-to-face shootout, a classic Wild West duel with both men drawing their pistols in a dusty street, bullets flying, smoke clearing, and one man left standing. That's the image we often have of the end of a gunfighter's life, isn't it? A blaze of glory, or a tragic but epic confrontation. But John Wesley Hardin's end was anything but glorious or epic in the traditional sense. On that fateful evening, Hardin was playing dice at the Acme Saloon in El Paso. He was relaxed, perhaps a little too confident, or maybe just resigned to the unpredictable nature of his existence. John Selman Sr. walked into the saloon, approached Hardin from behind, and without a word, shot him in the back of the head. Hardin fell instantly, killed by a single bullet. As he lay on the floor, Selman reportedly fired 3 more shots into his body. It wasn't a duel, it was an execution. Imagine the scene: the clatter of dice, the murmur of conversations, the clink of glasses, all suddenly shattered by gunshots. The legend, the man who had faced down so many, who had survived countless shootouts, who had outwitted lawmen for years, died not in a heroic stand, but from a cowardly shot in the back. It was an anticlimactic, almost ignominious end for a man whose life had been anything but. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Selman was arrested and tried for murder. He claimed self-defense, arguing that Hardin had previously threatened his life. In a surprising turn, Selman was acquitted. The jury, swayed by arguments about Hardin's dangerous reputation and the perceived threat he posed, found Selman not guilty. This acquittal sparked outrage among some, but others saw it as a twisted form of justice, the end of a long reign of terror. It really speaks volumes about the rough-and-ready justice system of the era, and how a man's reputation could precede and even dictate his fate. But the story doesn't quite end there, for John Selman Sr.'s fate, it seems, had its own cruel irony in store. Less than a year later, in April 1896, Selman himself was killed in a shootout in El Paso. His killer? George Scarborough, the very deputy whose wife Hardin had been involved with, and one of Selman's own associates. It was a final bloody twist in a saga filled with violence and retribution, suggesting that in the Old West, no one truly escaped the cycle of violence. The threads of their lives, woven together by conflict and grudges, were cut short, one after the other. So the shocking truth about John Wesley Hardin's final moments isn't a dramatic showdown, but a sudden, violent, and inglorious ambush. It is a stark reminder that the Wild West was often less about Hollywood heroics and more about brutal realities, personal vendettas, and the unpredictable nature of life in a lawless land. His death wasn't the heroic last stand of a legendary gunfighter, but a grim, fatal conclusion to a life defined by violence. It serves as a powerful, albeit tragic, coda to the life of one of the most notorious figures of the American frontier. What do you think about John Wesley Hardin's final moments? Does it change your perception of him or the Wild West? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please hit that like button, subscribe for more fascinating stories, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.